Okay, so now we're ready to deal with the height and the thickness. So let's go to the view called front, and let's change it to shaded. So what we have is a big 1 foot thick slab of material that's sitting on the floor. It's not really a very good countertop yet. Well, what's one way we could change its thickness? If you select the extrusion, you know, the boundary is what we sketched. In a floor, how would you determine the thickness of the floor? By the floor type, right? And you say, okay, it's got a layer of plywood and a layer of joists and whatever. Well, if we select that extrusion, it's not a floor, it's just an extrusion. But do you see anything in its properties that tells it how thick it is or where it starts and ends vertically? Start and end. So it starts at 0 from the plane it's drawn on, which was the reference level, the floor, and it ends 1 foot up. So what we actually want to do is we want to say, well, you know, we've got this reference plane up here that's dimensioned as a height. And if you select that reference plane, notice how it says top. So I wasn't really doing it in plan, but any reference plane you create, you can give it a name. Like this one says left, this one says right, this one says center, left, right. So the ones that were already there were named, and that one's called top. So what we want to do is we want to make it so that when we were looking down and sketching this, we didn't say we're going to draw it up in the top reference plane. We just let it default, which is going to be down at the level we're on. So we want to change that and say we want to associate it with a work plane, which is this reference plane up here. So reference plane is the term for one of these planes in space. Work plane is the specific plane, whether it's a reference plane or a level or a column grid or some other kind of datum plane. Those are really the three kinds. Work plane is whatever plane you're drawing the outline of your extrusion in. So if I say, okay, I'm already done drawing it, but I want to change it so it's associated with this work plane, then you go up here to where it says Edit Work Plane. So select your extrusion in the elevation view, say Edit Work Plane, and now if you say Name and you look at this little list, it's got the reference level, which is what it's kind of associated with now. So we want to change it so it's associated with that top reference plane. So you say Top and OK. Now it's sitting up at 3 feet. The thickness is going too high instead of down, but we'll fix that in a minute. So now let's just try flexing the height. Say, okay, if we change it, and remember, like Christian was asking, would the height be a type parameter? In this case, it is. So if I change the height from 3 feet to 5 feet, it moves the whole countertop up higher in space. Now, chances are in the kitchen, 90% of your countertops are going to be 3 feet off the floor. Occasionally, you might have a 3'6" or 2'6". So it made sense that the height is a type parameter. But the thickness, I'm going to go ahead and undo that so it's back to 3 feet. The problem with the thickness is if you draw it on that reference plane, it says the end is positive 1 foot up. Well, you could say negative 1.5 inches and apply that, and now it's 1.5 inches thick down. The problem with doing that is we want to be able to change that thickness as a parameter. And it would be really awkward if that parameter is a negative number. So you say, how thick is your countertop? Well, it's negative 1.5 inches thick. That doesn't really make sense. So I'm going to undo that, and instead I'm going to put another reference plane under there. So we want to be in one of our elevation views to create this reference plane because it's a horizontal plane we're making. So Home, Reference Plane, and let's just kind of eyeball it in somewhere underneath. Escape out of it. Now we want to dimension from our top down to our underside, so I'm going to do a DI in my elevation view. From the top down to that new one. Now this is my pet peeve. All the templates, when you make a family, they all assume you want 0 feet, so many inches. And I fix that by going into the Manage, Additional Settings, Units. Where is it? Project Units, it's here. I just type UN for units. UN, length. And if you go into the length units, you can say, I want to suppress 0 feet. And I'll never figure out, I mean, how many times have you seen somebody dimension things 0 feet, 5 inches? I don't think I've ever seen somebody do that, but for some reason the Revit people don't catch on to that. Yeah. Okay, it's actually, I was wrong when I said additional settings, it's to the left of that. It's got its own button, Project Units, or UN for short, United Nations. So check that little checkbox that says suppress 0 feet. Now you don't have to, it's just that drives me crazy to have all that space taken up with a 0 feet dash. in front of that. So right now my thickness happens to be 5 inches. I'm going to move it so that it's 1.5 inches. And then what's the next thing I need to do in order for that to really be a thickness parameter? I'm going to do that, but before I do, let's turn it into a parameter first. So we want to make that dimension. So Christian was saying you want to align and lock, and we'll do that in a second. So let's go ahead and select our dimension first. Go up to label and say add parameter like we've been doing. And we want to call this thickness. And let's make that a type parameter because chances are if this one's 1.5 inches, any others in the same kitchen might be 1.5 inches too. But we might have maybe 2 thicknesses, but it's not like everything's going to be a different thickness. Say OK. Selected the dimension, you go back up to this label pick list, and you say I want to add a new parameter, because we didn't have a thickness yet. Yeah, it doesn't really matter what value it is. You can go ahead and turn it into a parameter and then fix it down to 1.5 inches. So, you have your dimension in there?
Yeah, I'll get the parameter properties. Would you just do that?
I went into add parameter, are you at that point? Okay. Then you give it a name again, you say thickness. And we want it to be a type parameter, so leave that radio button checked. It says type and say OK.
Why is wall center line? Just before you click it there, when you have it showing the parameter for the thickness, there is a wall.
Here?
No. On the top ribbon line, right below the ribbon.
Oh.
Right? No. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. Just do an ad. Yeah, right there. Just to your left. It's a wall center line. No, to your left. But the
No, my other left, yeah. Oh, this is prefer wall center lines. It's a vestige. They really shouldn't have that. It's a vestige of when you're in the project and you've got a dimension. You can say, when I'm placing those dimensions, I prefer to pick center lines instead of faces of walls. So it really doesn't apply in this family editor. You just kind of caught a goof that they made there. Yeah, yeah. You got a gotcha on the Autodesk people there.
All the other related dimension and
Yeah, that really. See, I can say wall faces now. Here's a situation where that might be relevant. Let's say we're making a wall-mounted cabinet, and we want a dimension to the center line of the wall, so that we say, oh, I don't care how thick that wall is, I want the dimension to be from the center line. Not that you necessarily want that, but you could do it if you really wanted to.
So it's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's really irrelevant, yeah. Okay, so but what we want to do now, let's try flexing our thickness and change it from 1.5 inches to 3 inches. Well, the reference plane moves, but now we have to do what Christian said, which is take our extrusion, and what I'm going to do is use a little triangle to stretch the top surface and kind of turn it inside out, because the one that's sitting on the top plane is associated by the fact that that's its work plane. So I don't have to align and lock that to that plane. It's going to move when the plane moves, because if I change the height from 3 feet to 4 feet, it moves up because it's drawn on that plane. But I take the top and I stretch it back down to there. And when you're stretching, if you hover over the reference plane, it lights up in blue, and when you let go, you get a lock. So that's a little bit quicker, but I could use the other method, which is align, pick the reference plane, pick the top. Whoops, I missed. Align, reference plane, top, and lock. So either of those two methods works. It's just a little bit quicker to do the drag method. Drag, look for the lock, and lock it. So now let's go to 3D and have a little fun with our final model. We go into ice cube tray. Let's try changing the height from 3 feet to 4 feet and the thickness from 3 inches to 3/4 of an inch. And okay. It moved up, it got thinner, everything's hunky-dory. So I'm going to save that, and I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording. Let's go ahead and make it 1.5 inches. Yeah, that's fine. Leave the height at 3 feet and make the thickness 1.5 inches. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter because we're not really done yet. You can always go back and change these values. We just want to make sure they work so that when you change it, it really does change.